So the shaila I want to look at this evening, we said we were going to look at some of the different shailot that have come through in B'Mara Bazak, Ask the Rabbi, different responsa over the years that the Eretz Chemda has been answering. So yesterday we dealt with the shaila regarding Hilchot Shabbat. Today we'll deal with something related to Hilchot Tefillah. The question that was asked was as follows. Quite a common question in some places. So the questioner said the following. He said that sometimes you go to shul, it doesn't happen here, but you go into a minyan, and you find, this happened. There was a shul I used to daven at once where you come into Shachrit, the Chazan is going at whatever pace he's going, not really paying attention to anybody else. You get to Shmona Esrei, and you look around, and you find the Chazan is davening Shmona Esrei. There may be one or two people in the kahal that are davening Shmona Esrei, but everybody else is sitting down. Many people have not reached the Amidah together. Now, Tefillah b'tzibur is defined as 10 people at Tzibur standing and davening Shmona Esrei. Many people get confused about this, by the way. Many people think that Tefillah b'tzibur means saying Kaddish, saying Baruch Hu, saying Kedusha. Those things are all important. You need a minyan for all of those things. Those are Dvarim Shebiktusha, but that's not the definition of Tefillah b'tzibur. Tefillah b'tzibur is the Shmona Esrei, the Amidah that you daven together with the minyan. So the question is, when sometimes we have a long prelude in our davening before we get to Shmona Esrei, we have Peskei Zimra, we have Kriyat Shema, etc. And the question was, is it better to skip, to leave out parts of the earlier davening in order to get to Shmona Esrei together, because there is significance of everybody davening Shmona Esrei as a tzibur? Or is it better to just say everything, say the full thing until you get there, and then you'll join in davening whenever you. And there are essentially two scenarios where this comes up, where it's common. One is if a person comes late to davening. This definitely doesn't happen here. By the way, I say this l'shvach, I'm not joking. But I commented about this the first Shabbat that I was here, the first time I was in the shul, that I haven't seen in any other shul that I've ever been in, where you walk in, 10 minutes before davening has started, the shul is full. It's an amazing thing. People come on time. People take it seriously. It should be like that. It should be like that everywhere. You can't have everything. So it's like when one saw a sign and someone said Aleinu l'shabach is not tefillat derech. But okay, so one scenario is people coming late, and they can't catch up. So is it better to just catch up and then get to Shemona Esrei whenever you do, or should you skip them? Or if people come on time, but again, people have different ways of davening. Some people daven quicker, some people daven slower. You can't keep up. You're not going to be able to say everything and keep up. So should you skip to say what needs to be said and to begin Shemona Esrei together with the tzibur? Now, in the very first siman in Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch tells us that tov lomar ma'at tachnunim velo kavana me'abot tachnunim tov ma'at tachnunim bekavana me'abot tachnunim velo kavana. Right? It's better to say a few things over there. He's not specifically addressing the question of Peskei Zimra. We're saying there is something better in terms of Tehillim, Tachnunim, extra supplications that we say. Better to say fewer with more kavanah than to say a lot without kavanah. We'll see how that relates to this figure as well. So the pashtur is the Shulchan Aruch, and the tshuva begins as follows. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Nun Bet, where the title of the siman is Din Misha Shahal Avo LaBeit HaKnesset Ad Yishtabach. So somebody who came late to davening until Yishtabach, and the Shulchan Aruch gives us the framework, gives us the breakdown of the things which a person should skip if they aren't going to get to Tefillah b'tzibur on time together with the tzibur. Right? It says in Ba'al Beit HaKnesset Umatzah tzibur b'sof psukei zimra. The alarm clock didn't work. You forgot today was Rosh Chodesh and davening started 20 minutes earlier, whatever it was, and you came and you found that the tzibur was already at the end of psukei zimra. So Omer Baruch she'amar admura b'tishbachot achar kach tila leDavid ad me'ata ve'ad olam haleluka. And he goes on. He says, you say Baruch she'amar, you say Ashrei, you say some of the prakim of that we say after Ashrei, and you say and you say Yishtabach. And some of the Siddurim at the back, they have these charts. If you come late, what do you say? To study the charts before you come late, because otherwise you definitely won't have time. But in any event, and the Shulchan Aruch goes on, he says, if you don't have enough time for that, you can skip less, you can skip more, you can say less, you can say just Baruch She'amar Ashrei Yishtabach, that's the minimum. Shulchan Aruch actually is even more maker. He says, if you are too late for that, you could come in and you could just say Kriyat Shema with its brachot, and then say and then say Shmona Esrei. The Mishnah Berurah points out that no, we don't do this. He says that we should say at least the very minimum, even if it means you're going to miss tefillah, but you should say Baruch She'amar Ashrei Yishtabach. But essentially, what we see, it seems pretty clear from the Psak of the Shulchan Aruch that yes, there's an entire siman that tells us you skip in order to get there on time, in order to daven together. So why is this even a question? So the reason it's a question is because the Be'er Heitev quotes from the Chavruta of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch had a very, very interesting Chavruta. Right? He had a Magid, right? There's a sefer called Magid Meisharim, which was written down, which was all these things which a Magid, a Malach, would come and would learn with the Beit Yosef, and he revealed to him all sorts of halachot, and these were written down in the sefer called Magid Meisharim. There was one night it's brought. The Shla Kadosh brings a story of when the Beit Yosef was learning about and the Magid came and told him about to do with Shavuot and to do with learning about the Beit HaMikdash and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still in Galut, etc. There's a very, very interesting story that is learned from that. But in any event, regarding this, so the Magid told him the following, and it's brought in the Be'er Heitev, which is one of the commentaries brought on the Daf from the Shulchan Aruch in the Mishnah Berurah. He says, Magid is here LaBeit Yosef, Lavo LaBeit HaKnesset Bashkama. So the Magid warns the Beit Yosef to come to Shul on time. Again, what's the Havamina? The Beit Yosef wasn't coming to Shul on time, I don't know. But he says, be very, very careful to come on time. Why? In order that you should be able to pray in order without having to skip anything. Because what happens if you skip? Is a velo b'dilug. Okay. I don't know exactly what ma'apech hatzinorot means. Loosely translated as confusing the pipes, the channels of energy. This is a Kabbalistic concept. It means that something's going wrong. There's a specific order that you have to daven in. You have to say these tefillot in the specific order that they are. They are doing things in Shamayim, and if you say them in the wrong order, you skip things, you're messing it up. So therefore, but what we see from here, we see in the sport of the Be'er Heitev, and this is the Magid Meisharim, who was learning with the Beit Yosef, that there is such significance, and it's brought down in the Siddur Ha'ari, and it's brought down in the Zohar, that there is a significance of saying the tefillot in the proper order, that you can't skip. You can't skip because then you'll mess everything up. So which one trumps it? Is it, do we go by the pshat in the Shulchan Aruch that tells us to skip, or do we go by what the Magid told the Beit Yosef that no, you shouldn't skip? You should do things in order, even if that means coming at the expense of the thing. Yeah.
Beit Yosef certainly knew what the Magid told him, and he certainly knew what the Ari said.
Right.
He still passed him together.
Right. Okay. So the question is, so we can ask chronologically in terms of when this happened with the Magid, was it before or after at the Shulchan Aruch? It's not unheard of that we find sometimes Rishonim, Achronim change their opinion after something's been published. But we can say even more than that. First of all, if you look carefully at what the Magid told him, I'll read it again. He said, "He's here LaBeit Yosef lavo LaBeit HaKnesset Bashkama." He wanted him to come on time, in order that you can say things without skipping. So we can make an difference here. You have to come on time so that you won't have to skip. But if you didn't come on time and you had to skip, you would do that, right? There's a problem here. But he's saying that he's not saying don't skip necessarily. He's saying this is how the Eliyahu Rabbah learns it, and he brings it down. He says, saying you have to come on time so that you don't skip, because if you don't come on time, you will have to skip. That has its own problems. But when you're in that situation, which is a b'diavad situation, still you've got the dilemma. What's more important? Meaning there's a problem with skipping. There's a problem with not getting to Shmona Esrei on time with the tzibur, which one is going to be a greater problem? Both these are a problem. But if you're not there on time, then you would have to skip. That's one way. That's one way of reading it. That's what some. Others, the Chacham Tzvi writes, in fact, that what the Ari was talking about, what the Zohar was talking about not skipping, not changing the order, he said that's only when you're davening by yourself. Person's davening without a minyan. Okay, so it's very so there are no conflicting values here at all. It's the question of, are you going to say everything in the right order, or you're going to be lazy and you're going to leave things out? You can't leave things out. You have to say it in the right order. But if there is another conflicting value of tefillah b'tzibur, that would trump it. And finally, the third question, going back to the question you raised as well, is we have here two competing things. We have the Beit Yosef giving us the halacha based on his halachic reasoning, and then we have Kabbalistic reasoning as well. And this is something we find a number of different places in the Beit Yosef, in the Shulchan Aruch, and the Poskim discuss when we have a contradiction between halacha and Kabbalah, or do we paskin halacha based on Kabbalistic reasons? There are two famous cases in the Ramah, where the Ramah says that we paskin halacha, and he says for a certain Kabbalistic reason. But over there is no machlok. There is no competing. One of them I actually mentioned last week. One of them is, which I didn't mention, is in Hilchot Kiddushin, right? When you do Kiddushay Kesef and we give a ring, that today is the universal, for many years, the universal practice. It doesn't, strictly speaking, doesn't have to be a ring. It could be any item of monetary value. Give a ring. One of the reasons why the ring is a Kabbalistic reason, that has to be specifically a ring. But also, what the Ramah tells us on Friday night, that's what I mentioned the other week without going to this part, but where we have the two chalot, which challah do we eat first when we say the bracha? We eat the bottom one. And why? That's where the Ramah says, famously, he says it's because of Kabbalistic reasons. By the way, these Kabbalistic reasons apparently only apply on Friday night. They don't apply on Shabbos day. They don't apply for Yom Tov either. And then you can take the top challah. But on Friday night, you take the bottom one. But that's so we have a general question as to whether we paskin halacha according to Kabbalah. It's more of a question when there's a contradiction, where the halachic, the sources in the Gemara say A, the sources in Kabbalah say B. Which one wins over the other? And many times we say that we don't neglect the basic halachic reasoning for the Kabbalistic reason, and you could argue that that's the case over here as well, and that's why the Beit Yosef didn't bring it. So the generally accepted custom is that if one is late for davening, as we just said, then go by the Pshat in the Shulchan Aruch, and this is what Rav Ovadia writes. Again, Ovadia in many cases takes the Kabbalistic reasoning as well, but he says over here, Shlomo Zalman also say you can skip. You should skip in order to get to Shmona Esrei on time with the tzibur. Okay, but what about if a person wasn't late? Person came on time. Person did everything right the way they were meant to do. They even came early to davening, but they can't keep up. And by the time you get to Shtabach, and by the time you get to Shmona Esrei, the Chazan has already started. In such a case, is the person required to skip from Sukkot Zimra? Can they choose to skip from Sukkot Zimra? So let's divide it into two. Which is, if a person's going to just say everything, and by the time they get to Shmona Esrei, it's too late. The Shmona Esrei has begun, has finished. It's already in Chazarat Hashatz, whatever it is. But so the Sharei Tshuva says that if a person wants to daven the entire, that if a person wants to say all the Sukkot Zimra, they're allowed to. They don't have to skip, but meaning they can skip, but they don't have to. He says, he has a long discussion about what happens if you're late, and then he says about Misha Dalkol, it's palel b'matun of a kavanah, somebody who comes on time, but they daven very slowly and they take their time. They daven with lots of kavanah. And even if they begin davening with everybody else, they won't be able to get there on time. And you just won't get there on time. If you're going to speed up, and therefore you're going to lose the kavanah, relates to the Shulchan Aruch we said at the beginning. So he says, so he says, in that case, if the person wants to say everything, and they want to say it slowly, they can, even though it means that they won't get to Shemona Esrei at the beginning with everybody. Other poskim say that definitely, he says it's not required. He says you can, and there's nothing wrong with the person's davening from the beginning and saying these ma'at tachnunim b'kavanah rather than harei tachnunim with less kavanah, without kavanah. That would be allowed. Just have to mention here, Rav Hutner used to quip. So he said that the Shulchan Aruch says the beginning better to say fewer tachnunim with kavanah than to say more tachnunim without kavanah. So Hutner used to say it's better to say fewer tachnunim without kavanah than to say lots of tachnunim without kavanah. That was his. That was. But anyway, there's one more question here which gets addressed, which is the following: even if we're talking about skipping, right, and catching up and saying Shemona Esrei together with everybody, what does that mean? Does that mean, because the Shulchan Aruch tells us later on that if a person comes into shul and they've already started davening Shemona Esrei, what should you do? So you should wait, and you should, if you're going to be able to start davening then and finish before the time the Shlech Tzibur gets to Kedusha, then do that. But if not, you should stop and you should wait, and you should daven together with the Shlech Tzibur. So the question is, what do we call Tefillah B'Tzibur? Is it only when you start davening the silent Shemona Esrei together with everyone, or is it also when you start davening together with the Chazan with the repetition? So this is a. That's
why we made the large Shemona Esrei. So people they didn't have Sidurim and didn't know how to read, so they went along with the Chazan.
Right, but nowadays that's not the case. I mean, nowadays everybody has their tefillah at the beginning, and the question is, somebody who would in a normal situation would say their own Shemona Esrei, is it still considered tefillah b'tzibur together? Because everybody's not davening now when the Chazan when the Chazan is davening. So this is a point of dispute, and there are opinions lakan and lakan. But basically, what it means is that if a person is not going to skip, but they're still going to be able to start Shemona Esrei together with the Chazan, so then should they skip or not? So there are poskim who say that that's fine. In this particular tshuva, they say that it's probably better to skip in order to say tefillah together with everybody, because that would be a higher level. But as I say, there are opinions both ways. Rabbi Kenigsberg Mincha Maariv Shiur